Imagine walking into Del Mar last Saturday morning for day 2 of the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, and then walking out of the track that evening with more than $120,000. Actually, there really wasn't much walking involved because I met today's guest after the races while we were waiting for the tram to take us to our cars. We struck up a conversation, hit it off, and then, as horse players typically do, the topic of, hey, how'd you do today came up. I did not do so good, but little did I know that the man I was talking to was involved in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. Top 10 finish, final results pending, of course, after the audit. Huge score, taking home, like I said, more than $120,000. I will introduce him in a second, but hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Best Bet. My name is Frank Scatoni, and I am your host. I know I say this every week, but for all you new listeners out there, let me remind everyone, this is not a traditional selection show. We are not going to talk about every race. We're just going to look at specific races and wagering strategies that offer the best opportunities to make a decent score. If you're watching live, feel free to leave us a comment or ask us any questions. The show will also be archived on Del Mar's X and YouTube platforms. Now, back to today's guest. Del Mar is his home track. He decided at the last minute to pony up $10,000 to play in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge the night before the tournament started. Talk about a moment of inspiration. He made the right decision. Please welcome Evan Topol. Evan, what's good?
Thank you, Frank. Great to be with you. 10 days ago, I never imagined I'd be sitting here talking to you. So it's pretty cool.
Or $120,000 richer.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the beauty of horse racing, right? You never know when you walk into the track what your day is going to be like. We were joking about this yesterday. The universe works in mysterious ways. We happen to bump into each other in the rain, mind you, after the races, which is, very rare for Del Mar, waiting for the tram. You did great in the BCBC. I wanted you to be on the show because we only met a week ago. I want to hear about your origin story, why you love Del Mar, what prompted you to play in the BCBC, everything. Because like horse players, hey, tell me.
Yeah. So my story is probably a little different. I grew up in the Midwest and didn't come out to San Diego until I was in law school, actually. I was in law school on the East Coast. My parents moved from Cleveland to San Diego. So in the summer, I was out here and never been to a horse race in my life. Didn't know the first thing about horse racing. And friends were like, hey, go to Del Mar. It's a social thing. So I went. Didn't know the first thing about horse racing. I watched the races and I'm watching these people cheer, so intensely as these horses are coming to the finish line. I'm like, what? Why? What's going on? And then I realized that they've all made bets on different horses. So they're cheering for their horse. And wow, this is a cool concept. So I started out betting like $2 and I would always bet long shots and I would bet like 45 to 1 shot and it would win. I was like, wow, I bet $2 and made $90. This is pretty crazy. And so just kind of doing the social thing, it was a fun atmosphere coming out to Del Mar. It's just the summer atmosphere, as you know, it's really hard to match. I haven't been, to all the tracks, but it's tough to beat, and to have it in our backyard, it's pretty awesome. So that was kind of the start of it. And I got a little more into it. I had a friend who had some horses with Peter Miller. So I met Peter, met Bob Hess Jr., and met his son Garrison, and kind of, learned some more, met some people at the track, and kind of really just self-taught handicapper. And kind of, this is about 16 years ago, I started going to the races. And then I'd say in the last maybe 10 years when I've actually been kind of developing my handicapping and developing betting. So I'm self-taught using the form, now using the formulator. Those are kind of my main tools, but I use workout reports, watch replays. So those are kind of, probably traditional, handicapping tools that I use, but you try to get as much information as possible to help me make a educated wager. I started out, I think what was attractive to me is betting a little to make a lot.
Right.
And so kind of like the pick six was a really attractive wager. It's like, wow, I could bet, $20 and make thousands, and I hit a pick six, about 10 years ago, and that kind of got me going on that. And it's like, wow, I could actually do this and make some money. So, the big score is always kind of the attractive thing, but yeah, that's kind of my story. I've been, coming out to Del Mar now for the last, 16 years or so. So it's been fun.
I'm so happy to hear this, because your origin story is very similar to mine. I talk to a lot of people on this show and at my seminars, and just people meet in the racetrack, and most of them got into it because of a family member, their grandfather or their grandmother or their dad, whatever, got in from a young age. I'm like you. I had a friend who said, hey, I was in New York, didn't pay attention to horse racing, was in book publishing, I was reading a lot, and I watched baseball. Like, those were my things. That was it. So a friend of mine said, hey, come out to the racetrack, Belmont Stakes. It's a big race. It's a big deal. I get to Belmont Park, and I get off the Long Island Railroad, and we walk in, and I was like transported to a different universe.
Yeah.
I'm used to big, tall buildings and concrete and gray. I look up, the sky is blue. There's green, trees, grass, horses, colorful silks, jockeys, 100,000 people. I'm like, what's going on? So same as you, I went socially. I just went to have fun. Get to the big race. I'm sure most people have heard this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. You get to the big race. I didn't make a bet all day. I was just having fun. My buddy goes, come on, man. You got to make at least one bet. It's the Belmont Stakes. Here.
Right.
So, okay, fine. I look at the program. Editor's note. It's 1996. It was fate. I'm an editor. Editor's note. Made my first bet. Won my first bet and won a decent amount of money. I go, this is the greatest place on earth. I never knew this existed before.
Yeah.
Probably the most expensive lesson I've ever learned, because I go back the next week and thought, hey, I could, just pick names like some kind of Nostradamus or something.
Right.
No. But it started just that excitement that you talk about, cheering and watching the horses run and getting that thrill and the competition, and looking around and seeing everybody just for 58 seconds or 2 minutes. Right. Everyone is focused on one thing, watching their horse run. And I was hooked. I was lucky enough to meet a couple of people in the industry. And then I got to know this is a whole world that I knew nothing about.
Right.
The men and women who care for the horses and devote their lives. I was hooked, blown away, and same as you. And then I decided, like, you know what? There's an art and a science to this, right? You look at the racing form and it looks like hieroglyphics.
Right.
Then you realize, oh, these are statistics. We can try to figure things out. So let's talk a little bit about your handicapping process, because you did say you use the racing form, you use Formulator. First of all, just talk a little bit briefly about your evolution. Like you said, you bet long shots here and there, and then you started to get serious. And now when you walk in and say, hey, I just ponied up $10,000, starting with a $7,500 bankroll in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, playing against the best handicappers and horse players in the world.
Right.
What do I do?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. That was my first Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. I followed it a little bit, but never actually played in it. Tried to qualify the online qualifiers and got close a couple times, but so my process is really, I start with the form, just the classic form online. I go through the whole card, starting with the last race. I kind of like to work backwards, because I feel like the harder races tend to be later in the card. So I'll kind of work backwards. I'll handicap each race, and then I'll kind of step back and say, okay, is there a horse that I really want to lean on or single, or is there a particular sequence, pick 6, pick 5, where I can maybe narrow it down to either a single or 2 horses in a race, and then spread in some others. So I kind of evaluate in that way. But individually, each race, I start with the morning line favorite, and then I look and just compare the horses. Can I beat this horse? Right. And just look for different angles, whether it's trainer statistics. I get deep into the formulator sometimes. Maybe it's a maiden race, look at pedigree, If I can, I like to watch the workouts. That can really tell you a lot. You see a horse, maybe it's a maiden first-time starter, and it's working with like a stakes horse, and it's keeping up with that horse. That could tell you a lot.
Right.
It's not necessarily something you're going to see. You can't see it in the form. Even sometimes workout reports. It's not necessarily going to tell you everything about it. So it's nice to have eyes on that, to actually see it. I've had a couple.
Can I ask you, because this is as a horse player, you have to understand your strengths and your weaknesses. Workouts, the weakest part of my game. I could look at what's in the printed form, the work pattern, and then I could watch the work. And when a horse isn't in competition for me, I cannot discern how well that horse is running. To me, they're just like horses running around a track. What are you looking for, and what did you pick up on?
Yeah, I can't claim to be an expert, but it helps if a horse is working with another horse, and I always want to look to see who that horse is. Okay. If it's a winner, if it's an accomplished horse, that kind of tells me. And I just like to kind of look how they're moving. If they look like they're really moving well over the track and easily, in a work especially, and if they gallop out past and they keep going, and if say hopefully they're working with a mate, and you can kind of see that they're fighting off that horse, or they're gonna go by. So I like to see that. I like to see if they're tracking a horse, maybe they're getting by that horse. So just kind of it's definitely not. I don't claim to be any expert in watching works. I have a friend who has been in horse racing his whole life, and he'll sometimes watch works, and I'll say, hey, what do you think of that work? And we kind of compare notes about it. He has a better eye than me because he's been around horses all of his life. But yeah, they're just little things. It's just can be subtle things. Like I've watched a horse work earlier this year, and it was a first-time starter, and I looked at the pedigree. I watched the work. It just looked like the horse was doing it easily, and he was ready to run, and he went off at like 26-1 and won his first race. And so
it's that little extra level of work that separates you from other people. And I tell everyone, especially in this day and age where the markets are so efficient, there's so much good data out there that players with computer programs can create algorithms. And 10 years ago, I used to be able to sniff out 5-to-1s to 12-to-1s easily. Those horses they're not value anymore. Their price is their price. And it's usually very accurate. So anytime you can do something that, maybe a computer player can't quantify, that gives you an edge. So absolutely, workouts is still one of the final frontiers. Trip handicapping, same thing. Being on the track, looking at horses in the paddock, give you an advantage over people who aren't at the track or looking at that stuff. So yeah, we do have to work a lot harder. But I want to go back because I was also self-taught. I read Steve Davidowitz's book, Brad Free's book, Andy Byer's book. Study the racing form. I ask questions. What does this mean? What does that mean?
Right.
How did you teach yourself? And when now when you get to the point where you're comfortable enough to spend that kind of money to compete in a tournament, you have to learn the fundamentals of handicapping, and then you have to pick and choose your spots. But talk to me a little bit about your evolution.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you first look at the racing form, and it looks like Chinese. You can't make heads or tails of it. And I think it was just kind of going through it. I had some people point out the basics, and then really it was just a matter of kind of reading them, going through it time after time and figuring out. And each time I would pick up a little bit more, like okay, this is where you find Lasix. This is where you find blinkers off. This is where you find, my big buyer speed figure. That's kind of that's my starting point. So that was the beginning. But then looking at, I honestly, when I first started, which was kind of crazy, I didn't really pay attention at all to the odds, the odds of the horse in the past races. And that's really important now. I mean, it's something I always look at. So just gradually over time, picking up, when I first started doing it, I didn't really understand the conditions. Like I didn't know the difference between like a like a $25,000 claimer versus a non-2
Right.
lifetime. So it was just gradually over time, I just kind of picked up on these things just from doing it over and over again, just repetition and looking at it more and more. And that's how I really figured stuff out, just basically on my own.
You put your 10,000 hours in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a learning process, but I had some confidence because I would pick some winners, pick some long shots. So I felt like, okay, I'm doing something right. I'm on the right track. And then when you can hit a pick six, that kind of tells you like, okay, well, I'm doing something right. But
right, you intuitively knew that you start with the favorite. Is the favorite legit? Is the favorite? Can I beat the favorite? And if so, who am I beating him with? And then because now I want to pivot into wagering because, it's one thing to find a value horse. It's a different thing to bet that horse and make money in the most efficient way possible or to maximize it. I always joke around. There's two things. One day I was walking the Santa Anita and some guy comes running across the parking lot screaming my name, Frank. I go, hey, man, how you doing? He goes, you got all the winners today? I go, all of them? I only need one. That's, right? But you have to, if you're going to hit it, you got to hit it hard, right? So you got to pivot. It's one thing to pick horses. And that's why I say at the top of the show, it's not a selection show.
Right.
It's about making, this game is about making money. Would you rather brag that you had 5 winners on the card? Or would you rather brag that, you know what, I walked out of Del Mar today with $100,000, So how do you take your opinion and pivot and bet that horse so that you can make your money?
Yeah, it's an important point because there are really two parts of horse playing. There's the handicapping, but then I'd say almost just as important, maybe 50-50, is actually the wagering and figuring out how you're going to wager. Because I feel like, I can handicap pretty well. I could probably handicap with some of the better horse players.
Yeah.
But my betting, the actual wagering part of it, is something that I'm still working on. I'm still learning. This was my first BCBC. I think it was only my 3rd actual live tournament. So it's something that I feel like, okay, I've kind of got the handicapping part down or feel comfortable with that, but it's the wagering. So I've had a lot of painful bad beats where I'll have the like 15-1 shot in a pick 6 or a pick 5 or something, and I'll miss a favorite because I like to play against the favorites, and it's like so I don't hit the pick 6 because I didn't have like a 2-1 shot or something, and then I'll look and say, wow, I'm not, maybe got a consolation of the pick 6, maybe nothing, and it's like I didn't really take advantage of my opinion on a horse that was 15-1 where I could have made a good score. So I've learned the hard way in that. And so, if there's a price horse, if there's a horse I really like, say it's 15-1, first of all, I'm going to bet it win place.
Yep.
For sure. And then I'm going to look at, pick 3s, doubles. I like pick 3s because I think there's still pretty good value, especially if you're playing a $1 or more.
Right.
So I'll look at, are there races before and after? Are there price potentials there? Is there a strong favorite? Maybe if there's a favorite I like, maybe I'll just bet a big pick 3, singling a favorite and with my horse. And so I'm, and then I like the verticals too. So I'll bet, if I like a big price, I'll bet the exactas, I'll bet the tries, I'll bet the supers, keying, and I'll key it first, second, third, whatever it may be. So yeah, you definitely need to kind of figure out, if there's a price, how can I maximize my opinion on that? And so that's developing. I'm still kind of working on that and strategies how to do that, because it's pretty disappointing when you finish the day and you're like, wow, I liked, two great prices and they won, but I'm like, I didn't even really make money on it. So yeah,
that's the worst feeling. I'll tell you. I always say I've been at this game since 1996. The day I walk into the track and think that I know everything is the day I'm quitting, because that means I'm lost. You have to evolve. The game is constantly changing. You can pick up little tidbits and strategies here and there. And like you just got to work through it. It's a trial and error process. You got to find out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and you got to figure out where you're the best at, right? So
Right.
we're going to talk about a couple of races in just a minute. And to your point, you said, you know what, Frank, there's some really competitive races. I don't really love anybody to like really focus in on, but I still think there's an opportunity to make some money, right? So that's great. Take that. You got to take what the card gives you, right? And
Right.
and I love what you said. You look at the card individually, but you also look at it holistically, right? There's a horse you like. What about the race before? What about the race after? You have to have a game plan, right? You have to have some structure and discipline and say, I'm going in and this is where I'm going to focus my action. So we'll talk about races 5, 6, and 7. But just before we do that, I just want to ask you, you had to make a pretty big leap of faith in yourself to pony up $10,000 to play in the Breeders' Cup. It's not like you've been doing this for, playing in live bankroll tournaments for the last 10 years. You said this is only the third one. What gave you that kind of confidence? And was there anything about your daily play that you felt you had to maybe adjust or tweak based on tournament format?
Yeah. So, like I said, I signed up like midnight the night before. And I had handicapped Friday, and there were 2 races that I really liked, and they were early on. And I think my thinking was just, if I'm right early on here in the 3rd and 4th race on Friday, I'm not gonna bet my whole bankroll on these races. But if I bet a little bit, bet enough, and I'm right, I could maybe have a decent shot, and building up a little bit of a bankroll going into Saturday. And I hadn't even handicapped Saturday. I had done a preliminary look through, kind of got a feel for which races, maybe which horses I'd be interested in, but I wasn't really prepared for Saturday. So it's kind of funny. I didn't have like a winning strategy of how I'm going to, win this tournament. It was more that, I have some opinions on Friday, and I feel like, I'll give it a shot. It's not something I would typically, I'm not going to go to the races with $10,000. That's not the level of my play, really.
Right.
The biggest, I just love the Breeders' Cup because it's the best horses from around the world. They're all shooting for this. They're all coming in with the best. They're all ready to go. So you can kind of bet more confidently. And so I figured, I'll just give it a shot. If I do all right Friday, maybe we'll see. But it wasn't like, I know a lot of experienced players, they have a strategy of how they're going to win this. They're going to say, I want to get to 150. Or
right. It's my target. Right.
And they say, this is how I'm going to get there. I'm going to bet minimums on Friday and hit 2 races hard or something on Saturday. Right. I didn't have that strategy, and I wasn't playing to win. I was 3rd with 3 races to go on Saturday, and I could have made a big play in the last race, but I was happy with, if I finished top 10 or top 5, that, that's great. I actually liked Full Serrano. Unfortunately, there were 2 horses I bet in that last race, and bet the other horse more than Saudi Crown. Saudi Crown, I think, was the one.
The rail horse. Yeah.
Okay. But like Full Serrano, liked him in the Pacific Classic, and I could have done a little bit better if I really pushed and if I loved that horse in that race. I could have made a big push at the end, but I was like, I'm happy with where I was. I was leading almost the entire first day on Friday, which was pretty wild. And I was up to like 49,000 at one point, and I had a pretty big lead. Someone passed me the last race on Friday, but that was just a thrill. I mean, that was enough of a thrill just in itself. Like, leading the entire field of 585 people or whatever it was, that was like, that's good enough for me. My first time. I'm happy with that.
You're feeling your way out, you're feeling your way around it. I get it, but I'm gonna give you the best advice that Tom Quigley ever gave me when I started playing tournaments. Don't be afraid to win, boss. Don't be afraid to win. Now next time you can go, you know what? I finished 7th here. Now I'm going to go for top 3. You know what I mean? Like you can build off that. And your performance was incredible. Amazing.
Yeah. I played in Del Mar a couple times, a live tournament, and I went in to win. I had kind of a strategy where I know this race is where I want to this is my strong opinion, and I'm going to bet
Yeah.
like almost most of my bankroll on that. So I've had that experience of like, I kind of know the strategy you need to have to win something like that. But this was kind of just, I'm just going to give it a shot. This is my first time. I'll get my feet wet. And, like I said, the third and fourth race were kind of my strongest opinions. It just so happened that they were early in the card on Friday. And, I had a big lead after like the fourth race, which was pretty wild. Yeah.
No, that's the other thing. Like, a lot of times a tournament finish depends on where the races fall, right?
Right.
Because if you're starting off and your first couple of bets are early in the card, you may not want bet it as aggressively because you don't want to lose your bankroll because you like somebody else later in the day. So you also, if you have good position, you don't want to bet yourself out of position.
Right.
So that's the thing about tournaments. Like it's fun, it's exciting, and you could treat it like daily play, but there's a lot of game theory involved. There's a lot more going on. You worry, you know who the players behind you. They're sitting chilly. You got a target on your back. It's tough.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of strategy to it. I'm just thinking back, like, what if the third race and fourth race on Friday were later on Saturday?
Right.
I would have bet those races bigger, but then
if you had 40,000 going into those two races,
maybe I
had more bankroll to play with, right?
I might not have had the money to bet those because I might have, ended up
exactly
losing earlier on. So it's tough.
Well,
there's a lot that goes into it, but
congratulations. It's a great feeling, and I'm very happy for you. I'm happy we met, but you're only as good as your last win. So let's get down to today. We got a couple of races to discuss, 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to set up the race, and I want you to talk our audience a little bit through how you handicap the race, and then we'll put up, you have a couple of targeted plays you want to talk about. I'll put those up in a second, but let's go to race 5. It is a $16,000 N2L. We talked about conditions, right? Non-winners of 2 lifetime for fillies and mares going 6 furlongs on the main track. The morning line favorite is number 1, Perfect in Gray at 5-2. She just lost at this level, 20 cents on the dollar. Trained by Sadler. That was a little bit of a red flag for me. Parabon claimed. I like Parabon a lot, but a lot of times when you claim a horse, you want to try and move that horse up. Parabon runs the horse back at the same level, tries something different, adds blinkers. She has a lot of speed, so she'll be prominent early. Can she win the battle and the war?
She could. I think there are a couple negatives, like you say. Losing at 20 cents on the dollar is definitely a red flag for me.
Yeah.
Losing JJ. These are and claim from Sadler. Like, I don't know the stats on Parabon claiming, but those are kind of some red flags or just some negatives that I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna look elsewhere here. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking, at a $16,000 claimer. I'm gonna look for some horses that are maybe dropping in class. So the 5 and the 7 have run races at the allowance level, so they're dropping down. I also like that. I think both of these horses are going to be forwardly placed. In a 6 furlong sprint at Del Mar, I think you want to be forward. So I'm basically going to key in on the 5 and the 7 in this race. I thought the 4 was a little bit interesting just because they're trying blinkers. I think there's an apprentice jockey, if I'm right. They're getting the weight break. Mm-hmm. So it looks like they're trying things. Looked like a decent workout the last time. Maybe get the blinkers on, maybe puts this horse a little more forward. So I'm really just looking for some value, in this race. I'm typically not betting, $16,000 claimers heavily or at all, really. Yeah. But I just thought that with the favorite, and I don't know if the one might not even go off as the favorite. It's very likely that the 7 might be go off as the favorite. So
and the 5 will not be 6-1. I thought the 5 is a shot, but still, could be still some value there.
I just think that those horses have run well enough at a higher level that they should be able to perform at this lower level. If the 5 and 7 are both like 5-2 or around there, I probably just will pass.
Right.
But if I do see some value with the 4 and maybe the 5 is 9-2 or something, I might still play this exacta and trifecta with keying those horses. But yeah, basically the play here is betting against the favorite.
Right. So assuming let's assume that these are the odds and these odds hold. You want to beat the one, and you're structuring your wager in a couple of different ways. Just talk to us about that process. When do you decide to play exactas? Do you always back up with trifectas? Is this a typical way you play a race individually?
Not always. I mean, it really depends on the circumstances. But for example, in the BCBC, this was kind of a typical strategy I had. I bet a lot. I think most of my bets were exactas and trifectas. I don't think I made some smaller win place bets, but really if I can find a horse, preferably not the favorite, that I really like, or maybe it's 2 horses, and I can key on those horses, I'm going to play them, in first position in exacta and trifecta. And if I think, that a race with a full field, 9-10 horses or more, and I think that there's a good chance I can get prices underneath, if I have a horse that's 6-1 that I like, and I think has a good shot of winning, and then I have horses that I think can come underneath at 10-1, 12-1, that's when you can really make a pretty decent score in like a exacta or trifecta. So it all depends. I wouldn't make these wagers with favorites. Like I'm not gonna key an exacta or trifecta with like 2 favorites on top.
Sure.
Unless, in the BCBC, I think I made one pretty big exacta or some exacta wagers with Lake Victoria and a couple prices underneath, and also boxed them. So it's not typically, but if I price, like I said, if I have prices that I like, and I think that there's also price potential underneath in the exacta or try, I'll key, if I like a 6-1 shot, I want to key it first and second in exactas and tries. And if there's, a heavy favorite, then I might just do like a big exacta box with that favorite and the price that I like.
Yeah, I guess I should have asked you. When you saw your name at the leading all day, what did you hit? Was it an exacta or trifecta? Both? So did you hit something like really, really hard?
I hit 2 races back to back pretty hard, and I had doubles. So I had a little double going from the second into the third race on Friday.
Okay.
But so basically there were 2 key plays on Friday. I really liked this horse Tequila and Therapy. It was a Calbred juvenile fillies, and the horse went off at 11-1. I think it was a 10-1 morning line. And I handicapped the race, and a few different indicators said that I really like this horse. I think it's going to set up well for this horse. I think it's probably not going to get bet. I wasn't expecting 11-1, but I thought maybe even 6-1 or 8-1 would be a great price. And I thought the horse had as good a chance as any, and was actually better than most of the horses in the race. So I bet doubles into that. Actually, I liked the favorite that won the second race. So I bet a double into that. But then in that race, I had exactas and tries, and I just keyed that horse on top. So I hit a pretty big exacta and trifecta with that 11-1. But then I liked 3 horses in the next race. It was a turf stakes. It was a field of 14. So I don't typically want to pick 3 horses in a race, but in a field of 14, and I thought they would all be decent price. So there was some value there. Right. So I actually played a double. I played a double from the 11-1 shot into the 3 horses that I liked in the next race. And in the next race, my horses ran 1, 2, 3. So I started off with a $20 try box and had 6-1 over 10-1 over 3-1 or something like that.
Right.
So the 3 horses I liked ran 1, 2, 3. And so I had tries, exactas. I mean, I haven't seen the numbers, the wagers exactly, but I think I probably hit that race for, 20,000 or something like that. So yeah, those were the 2 big plays.
Yeah.
That kind of vaulted me up.
That's amazing. That I meant to ask you that before, but now that we're talking about wagering strategy, I'm glad we brought that up. So in this race, exacta box with 3 horses, presumably beating the favorite, number 1, and then come right back with trifectas. And then you have a pick 3 lined out here. I'll circle back to that and put that back up on the board so people can write those numbers down. But that involves races 6 and 7. So let's move on to race 6. A tried and true $20,000 maiden claimer contested at 1 mile on the main track. The morning line favorite is number 9, classically at 5-2. Horses dropping in class from 50K to 20K, and that's always something to consider. But the horse is also going from turf to dirt. 5-year-old maiden, some question marks. What are we doing here?
Yeah, again, it's a favorite that I'm not a big fan of. I don't like these professional maidens where you see 0 for 9 or 0 for 12 or 0 for 15. They're never really horses I'm interested in betting. I just thought that there wasn't much exciting. There wasn't much exciting about this horse. I know it's dropping to its lowest level and of course could win. But again, I'm looking for a price. I'm looking for a way to beat this horse.
Right.
And I thought that the 2 is also dropping and is most likely going to get bet dropping from me in the special weight. But just the second race feels like they're kind of just giving up. Didn't really show anything the first race. So I'm looking for something, something more exciting, something that's going to be a little more of a price. So I ended up keying in on 2 horses and a couple of interesting things. So the 1 horse, I'm keying in on the 1 and the 8, and I think they're both going to be prices. I'll be interested to see what they go off at. But the 1, although the sire was a turf horse, I looked at the progeny, and the progeny of that sire are 1 for 18 on turf. And then I looked at, they had a dirt work on October 25th, was a bullet work. The horse actually started out on dirt. So they thought this horse could run on dirt.
Right.
So a few kind of little indicators, horse hasn't run terribly. Now has speed to kind of get in position. I like the 1 hole going a mile on the dirt. So I think, am I going to make a big win bet on this horse? No, but I kind of like a few things about it. And I think there's enough of a price and value that I'm going to take a shot. And same with the 8, it's similar angle. It doesn't really look like a turf horse to me. I know, they run on turf, but Accelerate was a dirt horse. The Dam was turf, but I looked at the siblings on the Dam side and they run better on dirt. So again, I'm kind of taking a little shot here, but those are kind of my 2 key plays where I thought there was value. And I thought, hey, they're trying dirt for the first or second time. They might run well on the surface, and they're not terrible. They haven't lost 9 or 10 times.
Right.
So, and then the 5, the 5 is basically, I think, has the most reliable form of a horse that's kind of done this. It's dropping down to the lowest level, I think, or maybe the second time it's run this at this level. So that's kind of my reliable play that I think the horse is going to be in the mix. I wouldn't trust him to win, but I think that, second, third. So that's why I'm going to play an exacta box with the 1, 5, 8, hoping that, I get the 1 or 8 to win. And then I'm going to key on those 2 prices that I think, have a good shot of actually performing at this level. So I don't think it takes a whole lot. It's a maiden 20. This is the bottom of the bottom of the barrel. But I just think that the 2 and the 9 are going to get bet, and they're not really horses I am interested in playing in. Of course, I'll use them in my exacta. I have the 1, 8 on top with those horses, and if the 1 and 8 are decent prices, like their morning line, I think they're both 10 to 1. Then I'll use them underneath too, and I'll wheel that exacta. So again, just looking for value, and I think this is a pretty good race where I feel pretty confident that I could beat the favorites.
Yeah, there's nothing nothing about the top 2 choices that makes them any better than the other horses you talked about, right? So I like that. We'll come back to the pick 3 again, map out that bet there. But let's move on to race 7. It is a $25,000 open claimer contested at 5 furlongs on the turf. I did this race for the Del Mar website. So if you want my horse-by-horse analysis, you can go to dmtc.com, click on the handicapping page, and see who I came up with in this race. I thought the top 2 choices were very logical and had shots, but I was trying to be a little clever with a couple of other horses. Tell us how you see this race.
Yeah, I think we probably have a similar opinion, at least for one of the horses. I think the 5 dropping down, I think has run pretty well at a higher level. So this drop in class is probably getting into the right level. And I just love how Rispoli rides, not just the turf course, but especially this 5/8 course. I think he ran second in both Breeders' Cup turf sprints with total long shots. So this, right. I just like, he knows what position to be in. He just rides that course really well. So, I don't know if the 3 or the 5 is going to be favorite. It could be either one. I was a little, not really sure why the 3 was 6-1 last time, but, we talked about looking at prices. I hate, having a horse that's 6-1 and now the horse is 2-1.
Right.
At the same level. I'm looking at value like that. So I thought the 5 was probably the horse to beat, dropping down with Rispoli. And then the 10 was just a little bit interesting to me because D'Amato doesn't claim a lot of horses. So that kind of caught my eye. On paper, I don't love this horse. I don't like that. It's basically a closer. It's really tough to close on the 5/8, 5 furlongs turf course. I just thought that I checked D'Amato's claims, used the formulator, and his claiming stats are pretty good. And although it's a very small sample, he's 3 for 6 first off the claim in turf sprints. So I thought, maybe he saw something he likes about this horse. He's got a good jockey, and I think there's enough speed that it could set up for this horse. Again, I'm not going to be making a big win bet, but I thought it was interesting. If the horse is 5-1 at its morning line or higher, I think it's definitely worth just a shot at, keying in an exact and try. So those are kind of the 2 horses I wanted to key in on. I think obviously 3 makes a lot of sense. And I think you talked about that in your write-up. So yeah. The only thing is, I do pay attention to the trainers, and it seems like Jeff Mullins is maybe started off a little bit cool. So that was just one little tidbit. But if the 5 is a better price than the 3, I'm definitely going to be looking for that value on the 5. And then I thought there were a few prices in there. The 8 interested me. Just because they're changing up jockeys. Antonio Frezu rode the horse pretty well and is back on this horse.
Yeah, that was one of my sneaky picks. Looks like Evan dropped out. I don't know if that's an issue on my end or his end, but regardless, there's the wagers for race 7. Let me put up the pick 3 again so you can see there. If you look on the screen, 4, 5, 7 in race 5 to the 1, 4, 5, 8, 10 in race 6, 3, 5, 8, 10 in race 7. I wanted to mention this when we were talking about it. Evan says he likes to pay pick 3s. Talked about this with Kieran last week. The pick 3 is a forgotten wager. I used to come to the races and play rolling pick 3s all day. I don't know why I got away from it, focus on other bets. Pick 3 is a very, very good bet. Find some good value. So there you have it. I would like to tell Evan, thank you so much for joining us, but he dropped out. I'll see him at the races and thank him in person. I want to thank everybody for watching. That wraps up this week's episode of Best Bet. Of course, I'll be back again next week with my guest, Kyle Roscoe of the Bettin' and Boozin' podcast. But until then, as I always like to say, good luck to us and let's make some money. Thanks for joining us, everybody.